Future Postal here with a little bit of a video disclaimer. I ended up replacing this bearing and it did not take care of my issue. So I'm going to go over at the end of this video what my issues were, but I figured this bearing was annihilated with how bad that CV axle was moving up and down. So without further ado, we'll get this video started and then I'll catch back up with you after it's all done. How's it going, rednecks? I'm out here in my garage getting ready to work on my Gambler truck, and I'm going to be installing this little guy right here. And what does this bearing go to? It goes to the left front outer bearing for the four-wheel drive hub. And I have a feeling there's going to be a lot more people that need to do this to their truck. So what do you say I hop underneath this thing and show you guys what's going on? So laying here underneath the vehicle, I can show you what's going on. This is the left front or driver front axle, and if I push up and down on it, you can see how much play there is in it. That's because the bearing that rides right here is bad. Fortunately, the symptoms of that bearing are pretty minute. Because the wheel is constantly rotating at highway speeds, the CV axle drives that bearing, and you'll get kind of a wheel bearing noise at around 60 to maybe 80 miles an hour. Other than that, there's real no consequences to having that bearing bad. At least I don't believe so. So what do you say we pull this thing apart and we see how bad it looks in there, because mine's in pretty bad shape. If you're like me and you don't have air tools, the next thing you're going to want to do is, with the wheel firmly planted on the ground, with all the lug nuts still on, you want to grab your 36mm, get some PB Blaster or some penetrating oil, spray the axle nut down, and break that thing loose. With the wheel still on the ground, take your 36 off, slam on a 22mm, break them lug nuts loose, jack this thing up, and remove the tire. With the vehicle properly supported by the frame, take your floor jack and put it underneath the lower control arm. And what you're trying to do is take the upper control arm off the bump stop so that it relieves both your upper and lower ball joints. Then you're going to need an 18mm for the upper and 15/16 for the lower. Remove both of them, and then we're going to try and get this knuckle swinged out of the way. With the upper and lower ball joints having the nuts only threaded back on with about one thread, so when I break the taper loose, this thing don't just fall on the ground. I'm going to take my hammer and start hitting these to try and break that taper joint. But before I do that, I want to reach up in here and unplug the ABS sensor and route the wiring off to this side, because everything's going to be swung in this direction.
Going suicidal on semi-trucks? Yeah, your buddy Ben's when he's too stupid to pull it off. I think the kid's super.
Well, that was a bit more of a struggle than it needed to be. Make sure to push your CV axle in further, otherwise this lip right here catches on the lower ball joint and will not slide in, allowing your lower to drop out. So yeah, word of advice, make sure you got that CV axle in far enough that that'll come out. So with all this done, you're going to have to arm yourself with a 15mm, and there's 6 bolts that hold this axle to that axle hub, so get to removing them. With the axle out of the way, we're almost ready to remove the hub so we can get to the bearing. But before I do that, I grabbed my oil pan and a 13mm, and I'm going to drain this diff so diff fluid doesn't come out of there. And I plan on replacing that fluid anyways, so yeah, what do you say we get that drain plug removed, and then we can get on with trying to get to that bearing. With the oil fully drained, I gotta say I was quite surprised to see what liquid was in there. I figured it'd be a mix of oil and water, but it was mostly oil, and that's kind of good to see. But moving on to the next thing, I need to get that hub off. And what I did is I went to my local auto parts store and I rented a slide hammer. Now I'm going to be using this thing right here with the slide hammer and 3 of my axle bolts, and I had to get some washers. So what do you say we get that piece installed on the hub, and we try to slide hammer it off. Well, it looks like I can only get 2 of the bolts on. So with that, I guess we're going to get the slide hammer part threaded on, and we're going to see if that'll work. No problem. I gotta say that was quite easy to remove. Probably could have done it with just a pry bar behind the hub, but since I have the slide hammer, I used it anyways. And you're gonna need one because this way in there is where your bearing is. So what do you say we get that seal removed, and then we try to get the bearing out. Well, there we go with 2 failed attempts using the little finger grabbers. They have a kind of long skinny one and a kind of stubby one here. The 3-jaw puller with the jaws turned inside out, and I guess I had to install, I could install 2 of them, and one of them I actually had to install with the arm in there because they all 3 wouldn't fit at once. And then you thread this into the jaws to spread them open. Grabs onto the bearing, and you slide hammer it out. Well, I'm going to share with you some of my findings, even though they are not ideal. If you take a look, this is the old bearing, and I guess the upgraded bearing does have more needles in it. But if I take the old one and slide it on the old shaft, you can see it's got quite a bit of play back and forth. And I have another one from my buddy, and that one has a lot of play too. Take the new bearing, slide it on, has about the same amount of play. Put it on this other one, has the same amount of play. With that being said, I'm not quite sure if these both are bad, or if possibly them bearings are going to have play until they're installed on the truck. So I'm going to cross my fingers, take the new bearing there, install it on the truck, and we'll have to see if it still has play. So here's to hoping this takes care of my problem. Honestly, I'm doomed to replace it anyways, because if you take a look, the slide hammer actually damages the bearing anyways. So with a, let's see here, what is it, a 1 1/8 socket, 1/2 inch will fit the bearing really good. Has a slight ID on it, so that will actually put this thing in pretty smoothly. And if you take a look, the bearing has the stampings or markings on it for the size bearing and manufacturer. That is actually going to be facing inwards, so you're not going to see any text on the bearing when you install this. So what do you say I get that thing put in there, get my socket on there, and we'll pound this one in. Alright, with the bearing hammered in, you want to make sure to not go past flush. And right about there is how I have mine set. Alright, with the bearing installed to the proper depth, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to grab some diff fluid and you're going to want to lube the seal up, and then you're going to go to your puller, and the puller actually has this in it. It's for the 3-jaw puller. It's to split them apart, and the seal happens to fit perfect in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to set our seal in there, get it started with a hammer, then we're going to set this thing up and drive it all the way in. As you've seen, we installed the seal using this neat little installer tool, and I did the same thing as the bearing. I just taped the seal right to the end of it to hold it centered. And now we're going to get ready to install our hub. What we're going to do is we're just going to slide it in, and I have a feeling a quick tap of the hammer and this thing will be in, and then we can start reassembling everything by bolting the CV axle in, popping our ball joints on, and tightening everything up. Well, Rednecks, I have everything bolted together. I got the upper and lower ball joints back on. I got the CV axle nut on. It's not torqued yet. I need to put the wheel on, but I wanted to show you something. This did not fix my problem. If you take a look, when I pry up and down, it still has tons of play. So I don't know if this is going to fix our problem. What I'm going to do is I'm going to throw this thing all back together, get the wheel bolted on, get the fluid all filled up. I'm going to take this thing for a ride, and I guess will have to update you guys on whether that took care of my vibration problem at 70 miles an hour plus. So I guess stay tuned. Yep. Well, Rednecks, as bizarre of a problem as this is, I met somebody else that had the same problem. And if you take a look, we were replacing his, and his had this bearing in it. This is a Timken B2012, and the one we were going to put in is a Timken B2010, and this is the factory one right here. And if you take a look, this one's a bit taller. So we're actually going to be reinstalling this one back into his truck, because mine had play in it when I installed this one, and it didn't change anything. And his with this one has slightly less play. So unfortunately, we believe he had that one changed at one point, and he has the same problem as me. So we don't think this is going to fix it. We're going to install that one back in. I'm going to get back to you with mine, and hopefully we have an end result. And if not, maybe one of you guys can come up with a solution. So it's been about 2 or 3 months since I've installed this bearing, and it did not fix my issue. What I'm having a problem with is at about 65 and up, it sounds like a wheel bearing is going out in the front of my vehicle. I guess I could best describe it as it sounds like somebody's hitting the rumble strips about 5 vehicles in front of you. And on top of that, inside the vehicle, if I place my foot right here in the corner of my little footwell here, I can feel a little bit of a vibration. Now, I guess one thing I could mark off the list of things that aren't bad are the rims and tires. This is actually my 3rd set of rims and tires on this thing since replacing that bearing, so I know this isn't my issue. So I not only replaced the bearing, but I replaced what the bearing rode on, and that is this right here. I would consider this your axle right here coming out. So this is your left front axle. This is not the original one to the truck. And with that being said, the inner raceway is what this bearing is going to consider this to be. Was not bad on both this one and my original one and the other guys that I replaced. I also don't think my brakes are an issue because I ride the brakes when it starts making that noise, and it does the same thing the whole time. So I don't believe my rotor is warped or my pads have a problem, and I don't see any real like rust spots. Obviously there's rust around the edges, but there's not like a rust spot where the pad sat forever. Now the reason I still believe the left front axle is still my issue is because if we come over to the right front, now obviously it's supported all the way along here because this is a longer axle, but if we come to the end here, there is very little movement up and down, if any. And then you come over to this one, and there's tons. I can move that thing with ease. And not only that, my seal is already leaking. I also have another subject that's doing it, and that is my Yukon. The left front axle, I can take that one and move it up and down just as much as the Tahoe. With all that being said, I don't know how much of an issue this is actually going to cause me. I've been driving this truck now for a year and a half, and it hasn't gotten any worse. The guy that I replaced his, he is going to replace both his front wheel bearings as well because he wants to see if that'll fix the issue. I will post that down below in the description if that fixed his noise or not. He hasn't done it yet or hasn't gotten back to me. So if he ever does, I will make sure to post that. But if any of you guys have any ideas or have had this issue before and found a fix for it, let me know. I'll pin the comment if somebody has a solution to this. Otherwise, I'm not too concerned. I'm just kind of glad that I was able to go over what is happening with mine and hopefully save you guys some headache from replacing it and having nothing come of it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and get back to work. How you doing, Bolts? How you doing, Bolty? How you doing, huh? You gonna fix my truck? Yeah? Yeah, you gonna fix it? Yeah, I don't think you are. Come here, Bolt. What just happened, huh? What just happened? Did my truck move? Yeah, is that the first time you've seen your truck move? What are you guys still doing here? Get back to work. Yeah, get back to work. Woohoo!